Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhaakumut takathur hatta zurtumul maqabir. Kalla sawfa ta'lamun. Thumma kalla sawfa ta'lamun. كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترونها الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم. This is Surah At-Takawthur, the entire surah. The translation given by the promised Messiah salam is as follows. That is, the desire of increase in worldly possessions beguiles or deceives you till you reach the graves. Do not set your hearts upon the world. You will soon come to know the vanity of your pursuits. Again, you will soon come to know how mistaken you are in pursuing the world. If you had possessed the certainty of knowledge, you would surely see hell in this very life, but you will see it with the certainty of sight in your middle state, that is barzakh. Then you shall be called to account on the day of judgment, and the torment will be imposed on you, and you will know hell through your experience. Because many people do not care about their final accountability before God, their actions are devoid of any mutual or any true morality. People go on behaving wrong to one another because they know that no one will catch them in this world. They only stay away from the larger crimes which are detectable by the law and which will get them caught or fined by the police or sent before a judge. There are those who say that they believe in God, whether they are Muslims or Christians or Jews or Hindus or any other faith, but at the same time, they behave towards people badly with a very low morality and sometimes even none at all. This is in fact a contradiction which makes no sense. And when anyone sees it, whether they're young, children, youth, or any honest observer observes their behavior, they either think that the God which they believe in is cruel or doesn't exist. This is mainly the reason why people leave religion and they start to disbelieve in God, because of the bad actions of those who apparently say they believe and follow a faith, but act very cruelly or immorally. But I would say that those people who are so-called religious are not truly believers in God, because they don't have any fear for their actions, whether they are small or big sins. This is the reason it is important to show your children and also other people through your actions, through your demonstration that you believe in the existence of God, and that you show it through your attitude and behavior in all your dealings. But the lack of belief in God is the main reason why people refuse to change and do not like to improve their behavior to a much more moral behavior and a much more better attitude towards others. This, I believe, is the reason we continue to see people misbehave badly towards one another. Because if they had real belief, even on a basic level, they would feel some remorse and feel that what they did is wrong in the sight of God. It is not just their conscience which will call them to account. Their conscience will tell them that God would be displeased with them, and when they experience loss after doing wrong, along with the agony that their conscience is telling them they did something wrong, with that loss, they will know that this is because they have done something wrong against the law of God. But when we experience loss, now this is a contrast to that, just by way of explaining that there is also a way in which we can have loss in this life, but doesn't mean that we don't have the support of God. The other way is that when a person, they experience loss, because they're following God's law, and they are not going against the nature which God created and the laws of nature which God created, and they also feel at peace with their conscience. Their conscience is not bothering them. This is called high moral state, and this is a moral quality of perseverance and patience. And this state, when there is a lot of loss and a lot of sacrifice, because we're following some moral principle, this state reveals a person who has a relationship with God, and it also reveals, I shouldn't say reveal, but it also carries along with it a lot of pleasure and a lot of satisfaction that a person feels in this stage. Therefore, it is very important in the pursuit of moral and spiritual reformation that we first have a belief in the existence of God, and secondly, that along with that belief, we know that we will be accountable for our actions. The denial of these two factors is the main reason why humanity ignores their inner conscience when they do wrong, and because of habit or pressure of the corrupt surrounding or society, or the corrupt nature of their heart, whenever they have a desire, they fall towards that with all their passion, and they do not care if they harm themselves or they harm anyone else. An example of those who harm themselves and also may cause harm to others is a person who is an addict to any type of intoxication. They experience a kind of hell in this very life because of this sin, and are prevented from any chance of salvation in the life to come if they do not reform themselves before they die. The promised Messiah ﷺ says about this that all those wealthy persons who consume alcohol also carry the sins of the people who intoxicate themselves under their influence. You who claim to possess understanding. So here, not only the people who are doing this bad thing, but they're also influencing other people. So the sin of that will not just be on them for doing it, but they'll have on them for leading other people astray. And he goes on to say that you who claim to possess understanding know that this world is not eternal. So take hold of yourselves, issue all immoderation, and abstain from every type of intoxicant. It is not alcohol alone that ruins a person. Opium, ganja, charas, bhang, tarhi, and all other addictions are similarly destructive. So all other type of heroin and marijuana and morphine and all types of synthetic drugs Promised Messiah is talking about here. They ruin the mind and destroy lives. So shun all such substances. I cannot understand why one would choose to indulge in these intoxicants when year on year they claim the lives of thousands of addicts, not to mention the torment of the hereafter. Become righteous so that you may live long and receive the blessings of God. He who remains engrossed in extreme luxury. So this is also another key, that a righteous person has a long life, but one who is addicted to sins and wrong things, their life is cursed and short. He says, he who remains engrossed in extreme luxury lives an accursed life. He who shows discourtesy or inconsideration lives an accursed life. He who neglects God and is unsympathetic towards his servants lives an accursed life. A rich person will be held accountable for their duties towards God and their fellow human beings in the same way as will one of meager means, nay, even more stringently. That means that those who have even more money, they will be more accountable before Allah. So one has to think about, if they want to be a millionaire, the responsibility that lies upon them, because this life is not, as I'll explain later, is not meant that we just amass wealth and that's it. There, you have to do something with your wealth. How unfortunate is one who places their trust in this short span of life and completely turns away from God and makes use of those things prohibited by God with such impudence. That is, they make use of these illegal things with such shamelessness as if they were lawful for them. In the likeness of one who is mad, when angered, such a person is prepared to curse, injure, or even kill. In the heat of their lustful passions, they are driven to the extremes of shamelessness. Such a person shall never attain true happiness until death seizes them. Today we know that the harms of drugs, but we are only shown the glamorous side of them because we are being sold them for our consumption, so that others can get rich off of us, off of our ignorance, or how foolish we may be. Whereas they go around, in Hollywood showing people and famous people who are doing so many bad habits, this and that, and we know. Check the track record of those famous Hollywood people, how long they live, how long is their life. It is very short. Look at how this example now the former Prime Minister of Canada, and those who are young, they may just know this in the name, Brian Mulroney, but who maybe lived through his era, they maybe remember what he was doing. Brian Mulroney was fighting, the war on drugs in the mid 80s and 90s, and now he has become a pusher for for drugs, and so that people will he will get benefit from it and get wealthy off of it. According to a CBC report, the former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, whose government once introduced legislation to keep marijuana in the same legal category as heroin, hasn't merely become a born-again weed evangelical. He now says Canada is poised to influence the rest of the world to join the cannabis bandwagon. So as the Promised Messiah was saying about those who do alcohol, any types of intoxication, they influence other people. And Brian Mulroney actually wants to set Canada and the world stage that all other world countries that are not involved in this business should get involved. And it's also mentioned that there are also other two, the former US Speaker of the House, John Warner, is also along with in that company that Mulroney is involved in, and also there is a famous chief of police from Toronto, Julian Fantino. He also, who is a former cabinet minister as well, he also got involved in marijuana company as well. Now there's another thing that we face, a destructive pastime called e-cigarettes, which has claimed the lives of many American youth. This was something big in the media before the COVID-19. There was, we all know, and if we follow the media in the States, there was reports of many youth who were dying. But it's strange that just recently, in May 17th, now that the COVID-19 is there and distraction is away from all this stuff, the then health minister, our Canadian health minister, Rona Ambrose, who used to be the, used to be, uh, advocating of how we should regulate the use of the e-cigarettes. She has now joined the board of directors of this famous e-cigarette company, Juul, and she's got into the industry to make some profit off this industry, which in 2018 made $2 billion. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, it says that in 2020, February 18th, before COVID-19, that there were, in all the states of America, reported that 2,807 cases of illness were reported with the lung disease or lung infection due to this, and 68 deaths had died due to this. So we are seeing how these are just some minor things about, but this society that we are living in, where everyone is indulging in these excessive things, they're destroying their life, and people who even claiming to be, telling us that this is something we should stay away from, are joining in the bandwagon and trying to promote it. The promised Messiah والسلام, said that to acquire that the people in this world are trying to acquire eternal happiness through worldly pleasures and obsessive indulgences. And I like to read what he said. He said, but people very often try to attain this happiness through other means, which often serve to increase their pain and misery in the long run. Most people tend to seek eternal happiness in the carnal pleasures of the world. They indulge day and night in drinking and fulfilling their sensual desires, and end up suffering from all kinds of fatal diseases. They succumb to trauma, paralysis, Parkinson's disease, intestinal ulcer of the liver, or they die as a consequence of shameful diseases such as syphilis or gonorrhea. Since their energies have been prematurely sapped, they fail to complete their natural lifespan, and it ultimately dawns upon them that things which they thought would bring them joy and contentment had, in fact, brought about their ruin. Some others think that happiness lies in worldly prestige, rank, and office. They too remain unaware of the real objective of their life and die with regret. Then there are those who keep accumulating wealth in the hope that it will bring them true happiness, but ultimately they also have to leave behind all their accumulated wealth and have to drink the cup of death in great regret and sorrow. So the promised Messiah is explaining here that as much as people want to get pleasure from the worldly passions in this life and amass many things, they end up with complete regret, and they don't satisfy themselves, in fact. They end up very soon in much problems and much anxieties and even many health issues. But then Hazur says, the question before a seeker after truth is how to achieve the true happiness which will bring him eternal peace and happiness. One of the signs of a true religion is that it leads man to this true happiness. Through the guidance of the Holy Quran, we arrive at the subtle truth that everlasting happiness lies in the recognition of God, and in pure and perfect and personal love for Him, and in absolute faith, which causes the heart to become restless like a true lover. So, my dear brothers and sisters, I've been going through the philosophy of the teaching of Islam, which underlines how we can understand how we can improve our moral state, how we can improve our behavior towards ourselves and our loved ones and others, and have a proper relationship with God. You see, the things which Islam and which religions are always trying to help and bring people towards is to improve and help themselves, to live long life, to be happy, to live with all their potentials, and to have a satisfying life. And yet, on the other side, you find the people that are trying to run away from all of these things when they deny the nature which God has given. But God is trying to tell man that try to follow the nature which God has given you and the things around you, and don't go against you, go against truth. Otherwise, you will come to much harm. So this recognition and this happiness and the happy life that we can have can only come if we start to realize the purpose of our life. We start to realize and understand the existence of God. The promised Messiah, alayhi salatu wasalam, has explained in the philosophy of teaching Islam, where I was talking last week about how how he discusses that man and women, they look at the worldly things and they see a reflection of God in them. But they don't realize the depth and what they're feeling and what is attracting them and pulling them towards this. It's in fact something else. It's something that is yearning inside, a desire inside from the soul to have a relationship with its creator. Just like the Prophet ﷺ said, a desire of the child to have the relationship with its mother, that it cannot survive even without the relationship with a mother. If you take it away from that, the child will suffer a death. And similarly, the person, he said, people are running after so many things in this life, running after trying to quench that thirst, which they can never quench in this worldly pursuit. And they ultimately are frustrated. But the promised Messiah and the Holy Quran, which he is in this book is trying to say, is that it's trying to tell people to realize what is the fountain where they can quench that thirst. And that fountain is in their actual potentials and their actual understanding the purpose of life. And the first point on this stage is that we should understand is that we should start to realize right and wrong. We should start using our reasoning. We should start using our mind and judgment on everything. And we should be truthful and honest to ourselves and not harm ourselves. And we shouldn't be just overawed by everything and attracted to everything that we see. We should be deliberate and try to think over. If we don't use our brain and we, in a sense, what is the purpose of intoxication is to take out the function of deliberating over something, whether it's right or wrong. The function is suppressed when drugs are taken. The same kind of thing happens when obsessive worldly passions come over. They suppress also our judgment at times, and we should open our judgment. This is something, open our minds. This is something that we learned during the month of Ramadan. The promised Messiah at this stage, like when we open our minds and when we turn towards trying to figure out why we're here, the promised Messiah says that we should come to an understanding about God. And he explains that the understanding of God cannot come through the way in which the philosophers and the scientists explain that you can understand God by just observing everything in that is around us. Like an excavator goes and he says digs a dead body from the corpse. He says it's not the duty of man to prove the existence of God. It's God's duty, meaning that there is one level of our understanding which brings us towards thinking about God and his existence. This is using our reasoning. But this, the promised Messiah says, is not perfect. It needs after that a second experience which will perfect that knowledge. And that experience comes from outside. And that's what the outside of our own thinking, our own mechanisms and our own designs, where we think that we'll draw up a theory and we'll figure out. Yes, we will. The promised Messiah says, yes, we will have we'll come to a theory that God exists, but we will not come to a definite truth that yes, he does exist, because we are not following the ways in which we can reach to that conclusion. The ways in which we reach to that conclusion is always the same in every religion, that we have to follow the laws of God, the laws of nature which are instilled in us, and we have to pray to God and beseech him and ask him, request him for revealing to us and showing to us. And this is where our knowledge gets perfected. And the promised Messiah says, alayhi salatu wasalam, that the philosophers will not get to that stage. And in fact, he's mentioned in other places a few times that what happens to a person who has this this process of thinking that they should come up with from their own intellect, will ultimately at one stage get frustrated and deny God and become an atheist. Those are the people who deny the process of knowing God. Like, for instance, our eyes. If we close our eyes, or we close we close the windows, we do not allow the sunlight to come in, or we close our eyes, we do not let the sunlight come in. How can we then say that, no, I want to experience the sun only by the heat on my skin, that's all, or for some other way, by some description that someone will tell me? No, what we should be doing is opening our eyes. And in this sense, God is saying, open your spiritual eyes. Try to see God through the way I am telling you, through my attributes of being kind, being merciful, of being showing patience, so on and so forth. This is what God is asking, and this is what the promised Messiah is telling, that through these ways we can witness God, we can see God, because he will reveal himself through this method, through this way. And but not through just using our logic alone. This is reasoning, but this is very important for us to first open our eyes, our physical eyes, and then we should open our spiritual eyes by allowing God to come in after we realize this. And the promised Messiah has mentioned in some examples of the existence of God, which move us towards believing that there is a creator that is and exists there, and by observation. And the Holy Quran mentions that, and he mentions, I'll mention just a few examples. رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى. That is, our Lord is he who has bestowed upon everything its appropriate faculties and has then guided it to achievement of its appropriate purposes. If we keep in mind the purport of this verse and then reflect upon the shape and form of man and all the animals on land and sea and the birds, we are impressed with the power of God who has bestowed its appropriate form on everything. This is the vast subject which we would urge our listeners to reflect deeply upon it. So he's saying here, or the Quran is saying here, that if you look at how everything has been created with a specific purpose, and we cannot, if we contemplate over that, we cannot escape the reality that it should be designed or should be had created by some greater human being than what we see in this world, and that is God. And then it also mentions a verse. I won't read every exact detail here. I'll just try to give the gist. That is also a verse in the Holy Quran which says that the sun cannot catch the moon, and the night, which is a manifestation of the moon, cannot prevail over the day. So the promised Messiah says here that if we look at the heavens and the earth, and how everything is moving, and how nothing is is falling out of its orbit, nothing is, after billions and billions of years, is not wearing out. He says the machinery is not finishing, it's still there. And also other verse of the Quran which tells the believers that, did you not notice that there aren't any pillars holding up the planets. This is something for our day and age. Um, and then also Hazrat Khalifa Masih the fourth, Rahimahullah, he discovered about the orbit, where in the Holy Quran it says that the mountains that you see, you think that they are stationary while they are constantly floating, like the floating of clouds. Such is the work of Allah, who made everything firm and strong. The Hazrat Khalifa Masih said that what this means, you can only understand this, is that the movement of the mountains which are firm could only mean that they are moving with the planet in an orbit, which means that the planet is orbiting, is moving on a fixed course, whereas before it was believed that it was not. And this is something which came in the present time, in the modern age, and this is something which is a revelation, a prophecy of future. These are all, if we think over them, they are amazing prophecies of the future, which excite our mind towards this. And then Hazur, he mentioned on even the Dr. Maurice Bachia, who is a French author, and he had wrote the Bible, the Quran, and science. He said that he didn't find anything when it came to modern science that it contradicted or went against modern science in the Quran. And he also mentioned a Canadian professor of atomy. When he was, his name was Keith Elmore. He was from the University of Toronto, and he's from the Faculty of Medicine. When he was comparing the Quran and embryology, the stage of how the embryo develops in darkness, in which we cannot observe, which we do know now. He was amazed, and he also gave some quotations from the Quran, as from the Hadith, which also prove the same thing, which is an amazing fact that science, medicine is proving the fact that the Quran is saying that this is true 1400 years ago, and this is a proof of the existence of God, and it motivates us towards trying to find God and trying to move towards understanding of God, who has brought us religion, has brought us the Quran, and given us the abilities to use our mind and our thinking to see for ourselves these facts. And these things we should ourselves. That's why we're going through the month of Ramadan. We're listening to this Dars al-Quran. I'm giving you tastes, I'm giving you guidance, I'm telling you things, I'm helping you to understand certain things, not so that you just listen and then you leave that and then you just okay, yeah, that's good, I listened, and I'm happy now. No, you try to get something from this dars, get something from this discussion, and see for yourself. That was the point the Prophet Messiah was saying. See for yourself what Allah is telling you. Go and experience it, right? So if we don't try to read for ourselves, and by the way, that the reason I have the books behind me, Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge, and Truth, is that is one book that we can read and discover many of these things that prove the existence of God, which the Quran is saying 1400 years ago. And then the philosophy of teaching of Islam, the book which is not a book which I can just say, okay, so I read the entire book, and which I did during the month of Ramadan, so I can properly explain it to you in a more concise way, but that you should yourself try to read it, because it is really a manuscript or a manual for understanding the Holy Quran and putting it into practice in our life. If you read it, if you go through it, and even I'm thinking that if people are interested in that if we take a class where all we do is we just study it from segments to segments to really absorb and understand it, because it is an entire book. The whole book itself requires that you don't just go over it surfacely. You should go through it and understand it. But anyways, that being said, I'm trying to get you interested in what I'm talking about so that you can yourself read and you can learn more about it and have that taste, more pleasure and more taste of your relationship with God. Now, one of the denials of the existence of God is the denial that God will raise us up in the hereafter, in the life to come. They say that when we're dead, we're dead. We're not going to be, brought back. This is, this is just stories that the religions they talk about. And the Promised Messiah mentions one very fascinating point, which is based in the observation of our life, and it's outside of religious teaching. It's just something of an observation which explains to us something which the Holy Quran tells us to use our reasoning to reflect over what He has created. So this is one example which, when we look at it, we can understand rationally through our own experience, personal experience, about how the possibility of the hereafter can take place. And he gave the example of dreams, and he said that when we're in a dream state, what happens is that the body is expressing itself in different forms. Whatever if someone is sick or someone has anxiety, someone has pleasure or something, this comes out in different forms and different shapes, and that's why sometimes our dreams are hard to understand, and they're very difficult to learn the real meaning and the real understanding. But actually what's happening is there is a process for which the manifestation of our inner self is coming up in our dreams. And he says that this is like a preview. I'm using the word preview, but he's saying that this is the way which we can understand, we can see that it's possible that we can our souls go from a different state, this dimension, this worldly dimension, to another dimension, and we can see the process of how our inner state will come out and will be reflected in everything around that we see. And that's a very amazing thing. The other point which the Promised Messiah is which is mentioned in this book and also mentioned in the Holy Quran itself, is that to the deniers who deny the existence of God, and they also deny that they say that when we're dead, when our bones are finished, how are you going to raise us up again? How are you going to make this all happen? And the Holy Quran actually responds to this in such a extraordinary way that it's inconceivable that if a truly honest atheist, a truly honest person who just uses the science to have an answer for everything, it's very hard for them to deny, almost impossible for them to deny. And Hazrat Ibn Si Rabi Ramallah mentioned this in the book, his book, which he quotes from the verse from the Holy Quran. Then he explains it. The verse from the Holy Quran is chapter 31, verses 29. Ma khalqukum wala ba'thukum illa ka nafsim wahida inna Allaha sami'un basir. Your creation and your resurrection are only like the creation and resurrection of a single self. Verily, Allah is all-hearing, all-seeing. Then Hazur says that this is the verse which builds the subject further and opens up a new vista for man's understanding of the life after death. The phenomenon of resurrection is related to the phenomenon of the birth of each individual. If one visualizes the initial embryonic stage of the fusion of the sperm with the ovum and tries to conceive from the vantage point of the end product, the birth of a fully developed child, it would seem impossible to believe that it would happen. Imagine the gigantic transformation from the insignificant fertilized egg into the living and kicking wonder of a baby delivered at the end of 9 months. A viewer of who has not witnessed this transformation repeatedly could not at all imagine it to have happened just by looking at a few stages of fused embryonic cells. Life after death is likened to this amazing process, a transformation from amongst nothing to a highly developed, he says transform from almost nothing to a highly developed and organized form of life. Now you understand the thing is that there is that embryonic stage. This verse is also talking about something much more wider than that. But at this point, we are understanding that when I talked about this in my previous dars, that the stage after this life will be like a development of our soul, which will take a long process until we are raised up on the day of judgment. That is something which we cannot think that our soul will go from that insignificant state and then be brought up again. But here the Quran is saying, look at your own birth. It came from an insignificant embryonic stage. But the other significance of this verse is even much more amazing and undeniable, especially for those evolutionists and atheists who believe in science, is that this Quranic ayat is talking about not just our stage of development in the womb from the very initial stage, but is talking about the initial stage of man, the single soul, or the single cell, when it started 1 billion years ago in the form of a cell, which, you know, evolution took it all the way and took 1 billion years or more until it developed into the stage of what man is today. And even Khalifatul Masih Rabi, in one of his question answer sessions, has said that the Quran is mentioned about the human being as being a vegetation in the Holy Quran, so that the life has gone through the process of evolution, through a long process which we couldn't even think about before, until what has come to now. And those people who are telling us that they do deny the existence of God and they believe in evolution, and they don't believe that there can be something that will come after this life, it's completely harder for them actually to deny this fact and deny the fact that they came from nothing. And it's much easier for them to believe now that they've seen the process or they've understood the process, to believe that it could happen after this, because our first birth, even our own birth itself, our consciousness came from nothing. We came out of nothing. And this is also another meaning of this verse, that we came out of nothing. Your birth in the hereafter will not be from complete death. You know, it will come from something and it will develop. So anyhow, this verse of the Holy Quran, if you understand it, this one fascinating concept which Allah has put forward to this, this state, the human beings at this stage who deny the existence of God. You can look at different levels. Okay, the evolutionist, that will explain to evolutionists. If you look at to the simple person who just understands birth with a very limited knowledge of science, whether it was from the time past or now, this applies to them as well. This is the fascinating and beautiful, signs of God, and it really, it amazes one to think that if someone were to deny this, then you would only come to the conclusion that they must be, closing their eyes and denying the reality that they profess to be following. The promised Messiah now says that in order to now in the philosophy he uses on the next stage is that he says that in order to understand our existence, why the purpose of our living here, he says that it's not for us to make that. It's actually because we do not come into existence of our own will. We do not leave of our own will. He says this has to have been given by the Creator. So we should look to the Creator who has given us life and existence, what he tells us. And then the promised Messiah says that look, even the way in which you can understand the purpose of anything is by how the measure of its potentials are. And the measure of a potential, he gives two things. He says, look at the ox and look at the bee. The ox, is maximum potential is that he can plow. That's his maximum potential. He said the honeybee outweighs the ability of man in industry, because he said that the honeybee can develop honey which even humans can't even develop. So he says that this shows that humans are not created for the purpose of industry and development. And the book, The Philosophy of Teaching of Islam, highlights the Holy Quran. It explains how we understand that the man has been created for something else, much more expansive, much more variety. That is that he uses his capabilities to serve mankind. This is something which we observe in all of the people who serve religion, and all of the prophets, they serve religion selflessly and give their lives. We see the potential, and we see also the pleasure, the deep pleasure that men get from it, and men and women get, and we also experience that our soul tells us that we are desiring that this is, yes, this is what we need in life, and when we get it, we have the extreme pleasure, and we feel the satisfaction because we have arrived at the purpose of our life. Now I want to leave with, before we finish with dua, that the promised Messiah talked about the way in which knowledge can be perfected, and he said perfection of knowledge, first after reasoning, has to be experienced as well. When it goes through experience, then a person's knowledge is perfected, and then after that there's a stage of revelation from God. The experience we see from after we have learned something, we have tested it, and he gave the example of a person who's making a roti. He said that the knowledge of roti is there from centuries ago, but the person that won't know how to make a roti, if he goes and tries to, he may burn it. It might get, come out a little bit hard here and a little bit soft here, and it won't taste correct. The experience is what perfects the knowledge. So that's why it's important that we also follow and we try to experience ourselves what God is telling us. Then we will have true perfection of our knowledge of God. And because we have said prayers, we have done something, we have experienced the pleasure, we have seen how we follow God's guidance, it has improved our life, it has given us success. This is the way in which the knowledge is perfected. And then the last stage is that it's perfected through revelation. Now I wanted to leave here my sermon or this dars on this fact. The existence of God we can see. The proof of the existence of God. I'm not saying that this is something which is undeniable or something of a matter of reasoning. I mean, because it's something that we can actually do in our own lives, and I'm sure many Ahmadis have experienced, and that's why I'm giving this example, because I gave example of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then maybe some Sahaba or his wives. But if we look at today, what are Ahmadis doing to prove the existence of God in their life? that is that they are following the laws of God, and uh, they are practically showing in themselves that they are have witnessed and experienced God in them in their lives. And I wanted to give you this example by showing you that when a person has received a revelation from God, has received confirmation that God does exist in dreams and in the life experience, and sometime even spoken to, the person is always, as we see through the past and we see now, they are always firm on their faith, and they always stick to their faith. And the proof of that God is with them and God has spoken to them, God has given them reassurance, is that when they are persecuted, they never back down. When they are going through a trial, they never deny God. And the example of the martyrs that we have in our day and age, and even Azur mentioned about a lady who is in jail, who has the sentence of, and we should pray for her, that Allah save her from that and make her an example, but save her from that, have His mercy. But she is, as a woman, is ready to lay her down her life for the sake of religion, the sake of God. And anyone would know that a liar never is a coward. Sorry, that a liar is a coward, and that a truthful person is brave, because when they have truth on their side, they never deny, they never go back. And especially when someone has God on their side and they've seen signs of revelation that God has promised them. And the promised Messiah said that, "O ye people, believers, the trials will come and you will excel in your faith when you show your patience in all types of situations, that you do not, make any excuses, but you will come out of it with patience." Because He said, those who truly have patience in God, they will not even see any signs of dreams. They will suffer even that, but Allah will show them after. And Allah does that from time to time. He gives His revelation to encourage them and give them strength, so that they can go through each trial and they can improve in their level by level. I wanted to give this example of one of our Ahmadi brothers who it came, which some of our brothers, I'm sure, must have met with him, if not most of them. Our Syrian brother from he was who is living in Toronto. His name is Muhammad Al Hajj Sahib. You know his story. He came to Ahmadiyyat because of Allah showing him signs in dream, and he was so convicted with that what happened is that because he was in Syria and there was, the war situation, there was a bomb and something happened where he lost the use of his legs. And what happened after that? And that's what even I was thinking for some time. And I came to realize that, and I want to share that now, is that he, when I met him, even personally after he explained this, he said that my family members are telling me, look, Allah has now taken away your loss. And I was talking about this in the beginning. That's why I said there are two types of losses. There's a loss when someone does something wrong and they feel it in their conscience. And they know this is because I did something wrong, because their conscience is telling them, and they feel like they're losing. But the other type of loss is when someone is doing something for the sake of God, but they know for certain they have done nothing wrong, and God is on their side, and God will always give them even greater blessing. And the person who can endure that more, problems, they will have much more success. So he said that my family were telling me that, look at Ahmadiyya must be false, because look at what happened to you. And he didn't deny his faith. He had strong faith, and you can see on his face, you can witness that this man has seen God. You can witness on his face that this man has pleasure in his his face because he has lost his use of his legs through that tragedy. But he still has a strong faith in Ahmadiyya. This is the proof of the existence of God, and this is why Allah puts all the believers in trials so that they can improve their knowledge and perfect it, and also help the other believers to perfect and influence them. Just like, in a positive way, the way that, Mulrooney wants to inflect the whole world with this pandemic of e-cigarettes, marijuana. The righteous people want other people to have a contagious of righteousness. So let this be, I guess, the example. And I would like to end here that we should offer dua. In the end, there are a few things that we should remember. Dua is very important, and I wanted to give this explanation that astaghfar is very important, and Huzur has mentioned very many times. Astaghfar is mentioned also by the promised Messiah, that astaghfar is what suppresses our evils, suppresses our anxieties and our weaknesses, and helps us to overcome those weaknesses. And then there's something else called zanjabil, or which is called ginger. That is actually when we get a power from God to strive and go on to heights. And this is a strength which is given to us. This comes through prayer, comes through astaghfar. So it's very important that we all do astaghfar for our ability to overcome our weaknesses, and then get the strength in order to move on forward in our lives to higher and higher stages of spiritual and moral reformation. We should pray for our beloved Huzur, that may Allah give him and always continue to have this good health and protect from all evils and all the designs which are from the Ghair Ahmadis against the Jamaat and against Huzur. We should pray, as Huzur said, that for the Waqf-e-No, pray for the martyrs of the Jamaat, pray for their families, that they may have peace, and that they will be given even more blessing for their perseverance. Pray for all those Ahmadis who are having different sorts of problems and hardships, those who are having illnesses. We have members in our Jamaat who are ill, members in other parts of the world who are ill. Pray for them. Pray, as Huzur mentioned, also for those girls who cannot find marriage, those who cannot able to find marriage. Huzur said that we should pray for all Ahmadis to be safe from this pandemic. And we should also be able to remain and have this blessing which has come out of this pandemic and this Ramadan, that we can maintain our spiritual level. Pray, we should fervently pray. This is a real gift of Allah. Allah Mia gave us this gift of spirituality, and how Huzur really spoke about it. And pray that we are able to continue our good works and whatever deeds and things we did, even the resolutions that we made. Pray that Allah gives us a resolution that we can carry that out in the future after the month of Ramadan. And Allah gives us a long life, that we can be a benefit for mankind and gain more happiness and more pleasure from and blessings from Allah. Huzur also said that we should pray for MTA. Pray for those who all around the world who have been working on, and I feel grateful for those who are making it possible that I can sit in my room, in my home, and talk to everyone here. Pray for all those who have been working to set up Zoom and then the online viewing of this. Pray for also those who are translating my dars. May Allah reward them all and give them many blessings, and may we have many more blessings that can now come from their humble efforts. Also, Huzur mentioned some prayers that we should pray. Allahumma inna naj'aluka fi nuhurihim wa na'udhu bika min shururihim. O Allah, we make you a shield against enemies and take refuge in thee from all evils. Then he said, there's a prayer, there is no God but Allah. the great, the forbearing. There is no God but Allah, the Lord of the great throne. There is no God but Allah, the Lord of heavens and the earth, the Lord of the magnificent throne. Ya muqallib bal qulubi thabbi. Ya qulubi bil qulubi thabbi qalbi ala dinika. That is, O controller of the heart, strengthen my heart upon your religion. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-huda wat-tuqa wal-afafa wal-ghina. O Allah, I seek from you true guidance, righteousness, chastity, and self-sufficiency. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min zawali ni'matika wa tahamuli afiyatika wa fajuati ni'matika wa jami'i sakhitika. O Allah, I seek refuge in you from being deprived of your favor, the decline of good health you have granted, your swift punishment, and from all those deeds which may incur that your displeasure. There are many other prayers. Because of the shortness time, I'll leave with the one, and then we'll all say prayer together. These are prayers which, as were mentioned yesterday in his Friday sermon. The last was from the promised Messiah, O Lord of all the worlds. And also remember Durood Sharif when we were saying our prayers together. This promised Messiah said, O Lord of all the worlds, I cannot do justice in expressing my gratitude for your favor. You are most merciful and beneficent. You have bestowed countless favors upon me. Forgive me of my sins, lest I perish. Instill your love in my heart for you, so that I may be granted life and cover my shortcomings. Enable me to carry out those deeds through which you will be pleased. I beseech your holy countenance, and I seek refuge in you from incurring your displeasure. Have mercy upon me, have mercy upon me, have mercy upon me. Amen. Save me from the calamities of this world and the hereafter. From all grace and blessings are in your hands. Let's all join in silent prayer. Dua kar le. Ameen. Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Vishay wasn't there? I'm seeing a program there, but
Eid Mubarak, Eid Mubarak, Eid Mubarak. مبارک عید کی خوشیاں جہان احمدیت کو، امام عصر دوراں کو، غلامان خلافت کو، مبارک عید کی خوشیاں جہان احمدیت کو، امام عصر دوراں کو، غلامان خلافت کو، مبارک عید کی خوشیاں جہان احمدیت کو، امام عصر دوراں کو، غلامان خلافت کو۔ عید مبارک عید، عید مبارک عید، عید مبارک عید، عید مبارک عید، مبارک عید کی خوشیاں جہان احمدیت کو، امام عصر دوراں کو، غلامان خلافت کو، مبارک عید کی خوشیاں جہان احمدیت کو، امام عصر دوراں کو، غلامان خلافت کو، مبارک عید کی خوشیاں جہان احمدیت کو، امام عصر دوراں کو، غلامان خلافت کو۔ عید مبارک عید، عید مبارک عید، عید مبارک عید، عید مبارک عید، مبارک عید کی خوشیاں جہان احمدیت کو، امام عصر دوراں کو، غلامان خلافت کو، مبارک عید کی خوشیاں جہان احمدیت کو، امام عصر دوراں کو، غلامان خلافت کو، مبارک عید کی خوشیاں جہان احمدیت کو، امام عصر دوراں کو، غلامان خلافت کو۔